So we are now live then. Okay, so hello to anybody who's joining us, and
hello everyone.
This is Edith Vignal. I'm just going to wait until a few more people sort of join us to make sure that we are talking to somebody.
That would be nice.
Yeah, it would, wouldn't it? Yeah. So, and it's recorded anyway, so people can watch this later as well. So,
sounds good.
But anyway, so this is me, Georgie, and we've got Edith, as you can see from the names. So Edith, you are one of our more recent SIRPA practitioners. And I know we chatted a while ago about your recovery because you had some really interesting insights in recovery. And I know you work in quite a different way from many people because you're very creative. And you did a webinar for our practitioners actually on using metaphors and the way you work, which was really fascinating. So I wondered whether you want to just, we're here to answer any questions that people have. And then as people come on, they can put something in the comments box, say hello so we know who's there. And any questions, but in the meantime we'll just start chatting, and we could chat till the cows come home anyway about this work, I know.
Exactly, yes.
And so maybe if you'd like to start off by saying a little bit about how you started doing this work through your own experiences.
So like many of us, I guess, it's through my own experience of chronic pain that I've come across this work. So I had different symptoms throughout my life. I had Vulvodynia for nearly a year, and I had RSI.
Right.
Which one would you like me to start with?
Whichever you want.
Okay. I'll start Vulvodynia with Vulvodynia because I guess pelvic pain, maybe not many people want to talk about this, but I think it's good to bring awareness to this condition. So I was not.
What is Vulvodynia, first of all?
Yes.
Let's start with that.
So it's hard to define because, like pain, it's hard to define pain. And if you look at I don't have the definition here under my eyes, but it's pain around the vulva, but it moves. It can be itchy. It can be burning sensations. It can be stinging. It can be just feeling tension. And that's when you read the description, you're thinking, of course, it's a mind body. Once you know, because it can morph into it can be many different things at the same time, and it's hard to pinpoint what it is exactly. And it can be, so it's around the vulva, but it can be more inside, more outside. So I guess, it's one of those where doctors don't really know what it is. So they come up with this term that encapsulates a lot of different sensations.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So you had that for about a year. And I know, obviously, we don't want to go over everything that you talked about in your own recovery story. But in brief, you were able to, once you realized it was a mind-body condition, you really were able to make that link, weren't you?
Yes, because you go through the cycles of seeing specialist after specialist and doctors after doctors, and no one can help. And I went to see a gynecologist who was really good in terms of validating and acknowledging my pain. But she did say, I know you are in pain, but from my point of view, from my eyes, I cannot see anything wrong. So you're like, what's going on? Then how come, if it hurts so much, how come you can't see anything? So that made me question what it was. And she said also, when I touch the same spot, sometimes you scream in pain and sometimes you're not feeling anything. So when she said that, I thought, this is so strange. And I had no idea about pain being an interpretation from the brain. I just thought pain was correlating to a structural issue. So that doesn't make sense. When you press the same spot and sometimes it hurts, sometimes it doesn't. So she prescribed me some antidepressants, and I thought, what's going on? Am I depressed? Really? I don't feel depressed. But I thought, okay, it doesn't hurt to see what's going on in my life and just to go into this meditation type of state and just going into introspection. And meditation was not a part of my routine at all. You just go through the motions when you start this work, or when you leave. And so on that day, I thought, okay, what is going on? Something weird is happening in my body. I had a big breakup, months before, and I thought, okay, what's been different since my symptom started? So I knew I had my breakup. I moved out from my house, and there were lots of different things that sort of aligned. And I realized that by going into this meditation state, I realized that I was scared into my very core intimacy, so inside me. And also at that time, I had night terrors. Right. So I was waking up screaming in terror because my nightmare was that a stranger would break inside my house. Right. So into my intimacy, into my inner world to hurt me. So I connected the dots between separate instances, the night terrors, the pain inside me, and the fact that I felt very vulnerable after my breakup. Yeah. Yeah. And then I could get in touch with that part of me that I felt very vulnerable. And because my ego was pushing through, I'm fine, no problem. And I was pushing down the part of me that was terrified. Yeah. So that part of me was coming out through nightmares. So dreams are really important, I think. Working with dreams helps. And so as soon as I connected all the dots and I released this emotion, I released my fear, I released my sadness, and the fact that I was just pushing myself too much, all my symptoms disappeared instantly. Wow, fantastic. Yes, and it came back years later because I was letting someone in, someone new inside my emotional space. Yeah. And then once again, I did more meditation and more release of emotions and gone and never came back. So absolutely. If you're listening and if you have pelvic pain, it's possible to fully, like all those TMS, mind-body conditions, it's absolutely possible to fully recover and live again. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just such a shame that generally people don't like talking about pelvic pain. If it's part of our, intimate parts of our body, there are less recovery stories because people don't want to talk about it, which is a shame, really, isn't it? Of course. It can help so many people who are struggling to accept their situation. Yes, it is something that they could work on. And I think also, as we know, not everybody recovers really quickly like you did. And for many people, it takes, takes longer. It's not as you've made it very clear, this is not a conscious thing. And so many people say to me, but I understand it. I know what's going on. I've read everything. I really get it. And I really believe it. Why am I not better? And it's because this isn't, an academic thing. It's not an intellect thing. It's not just about a conscious understanding. It's about really having that deep connection with emotions, those aha moments. And trying to get there doesn't help. You weren't trying to get there. You actually let go. You surrendered and you allowed. That's exactly the right word. I surrendered because I thought I have nothing to lose. I had a prescription to do some exercises, down there. And I thought, okay, it doesn't hurt. But also it was emerging. I felt it was emerging. And I thought, I need to know what is going on. So I could feel something was pushing. Right. So I'm glad I took that time because that's the beauty of this work. It's not medication that you need to buy. It's not extra things that you have all the solution inside. And I know it's hard. I know pain is really complex and unique. But we do have everything inside for this type of pain. And it's just getting through the layers often, isn't it? That are trying to protect us all the time, like your ego or, that busy, all these different things that are trying to protect us. They're doing a really, really good job.
but it's about then recognizing, okay, but now I'm an adult, I can deal with this. Just let me deal with it. And just, there's a lot around that. But I just want to say, hello to everybody who's joining us. And if you'd like to put in a comment, let us know you're there. If you've got any questions, ask the questions. In the meantime, though, Edith and I will continue until we get some questions to answer. Edith, rather than going on, excuse me, to the RSI at the moment, I thought it might be interesting, as this is a practitioner chat as well, to talk a little bit about the way you work, because I mentioned it at the beginning. And I know you, when you were doing your CPD webinar, you said, does anybody know what your first language is? And of course, we're thinking, well, it's French because you're French.
Yes.
But no, you said your first language is metaphors. So would you like to explain that?
Yes. So, to be honest, when I prepared this webinar, I really had to take a step back because it's so natural for me to use metaphors, even with myself. So if you're listening, if you're watching this webinar, and it's work that you can do on your own at home, it's just digging into the imagination. So I really had to take a step back and think, how does it work? How do I work with it? Because it's really natural for me. So basically, it's allowing your imagination to I guess, unravel, and it can be done through meditation. If you don't know where to start, I'm an illustrator, so I designed this.
That was lovely.
So I'm very visual, so I have images popping up all the time.
Behind you, the graphic behind you as well.
So not the little this one right here, yes, but not the sun. I bought this, and this one I bought it as well.
Right. That's lovely. Yeah. Okay.
So I've got images coming up. So whenever I try to explain or clarify something that doesn't make sense, or something that is a bit complex, like an emotion, or if you feel something that is a bit contradictory towards a person, I try to explain it to myself, and then there's this image that pops up. Or if I'm feeling in a state that is not depressed, you know how we have the wheel of emotion, in the wheel you have, different nuances for each emotion. I just use images for myself. I use the wheel with clients, of course, because it's very useful. But let's say if I feel a bit strange, I'm trying to think, how do I feel now? And then an image, I'm like a lion in a cage, but the cage is open, so I can go out, but I don't feel like going out. So that's how I felt with lockdown. Okay, at the end of lockdown, I was scared to go out, but I knew I could go out. And I thought, what's happening? And then this image came into my head. I'm a lion. I'm like a lion in a cage, but even the door is open. The lion has given up, basically.
Yeah.
So once you have an image, remind me, I want to recommend an excellent application for meditation. I'll explain that after that.
Okay.
Once you have an image, then you can work with that image and keep writing the story. So if I take this example of this lion in the cage, so the lion in the cage represents how I'm feeling, what's around the lion. Try to have a clear picture of that cage, what's around, and what's outside the cage. And then, as you go, you have to close your eyes, you have to be relaxed. And then your mind's eye or your subconscious brings more images. That's how it works for me. So I had this image that people were walking and making fun of the lion. I thought, bullying when I was a kid. So that's things you can journal on after, you can use that to journal all this information that was coming up. And then you keep on writing the story. And I thought, okay, the lion, what does he want to do? He wants to come out. Who could help the lion? And then, but I'm not, that's the way my brain works. I don't know I know everyone's different.
Yeah,
so
quite like that.
Yeah. So I really use that to understand how I'm feeling and what I want to do. And the solution that comes for the lion is a solution that I can apply for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that sounds really good. And it is recognizing that everybody's different, and that somebody who is intellectualizing everything and very much in their mind that would be more difficult, wouldn't it, for them to be able to sort of let go. And I know many people can't, it might be that it's about practicing mindfulness and self-soothing and calming yourself down before you can do that. But you are a creative person, and so this is why I think, especially for people who are creative, to work with somebody in a similar who understands them can be really helpful as well. Because you sing, you write songs, poetry, stories, all sorts.
But I think it's a skill. Don't you think it's a skill that we have as children? Remember when we're kids, we create stories with our friends or even on our own. You see those little kids, sometimes they speak on their own and they're having a fight with, you see them with a stick. And I think it's getting in touch with that part of us that we had, everyone had that. Absolutely. And just reactivating it
for many people,
into our adult.
Shoved down, partly through the schooling as well, because schooling, that's a completely different way of, it just sort of pushes it all away, doesn't it? And so I think for many people, it is about, you're right, it's there in the root of us, and it's learning to play. And I know actually for me, I even bringing my kids up, I used to envy my husband being able to just get on the floor, mess about and be silly in public, doing silly walks with the kids. Whereas, and being maybe in a restaurant, and he's messing about with them, and I'm busy going, no, just shush, you're being a bit too noisy because, where other people are trying to eat as well, or don't break something if they're messing about at home. And I was much more, because that's how I was brought up. And I had to really go within, and over the years, learn to start letting go more, playing more. Not being afraid to make a fool, being afraid to make a fool of myself, but actually being less concerned about it. And that's been a journey for me over the last, 10, 20 years, to actually learn to let go more rather than feeling like, okay, I've got to be in control of everything and everybody's got to behave and whatever.
Play is so important. And even anything where you let go even for 5 seconds. I noticed that when I'm riding my bike, I think movement as well, any type of movement that you don't have to think much about it, like riding, then I've got ideas that they pop up and I'm thinking, oh, I should do that for my work. Oh, I should illustrate this. I should write this song.
And often I combine that with journaling. So if I know I'm in my head sort of thinking about overthinking something, or maybe I know I want to write a blog, or but I've just not taken that time to be able to have it in my head to know. I know roughly what I want to write, but it's not flowing. I might journal and just sort of put a few notes down and then just offload about whatever's going on. Then I'll go for a walk, or I might meditate. Sometimes I get insights when I'm meditating. Sometimes it's literally, like you say, it's when you're out moving or you're out in nature and you let go. And often that's the time when, literally a blog can come into my head and I'll come home and just write it all out straight away. And that's so much quicker when you're in that creative mindset. And that's just the same for people who are going through this process as well, isn't it? Because, you might be in your head trying to work out, but what's caused this? What's triggering it? And really being in our head trying to do it. Whereas that's rarely going to actually help people find an answer. And it's about finding time to set back, to let go, to play, laugh, do all these things. Like, at times if I'm out, I'll start skipping, and then just skipping along, that's what a child does, and it can help me just let go and feel and have fun. So, but that's hard when you're living with pain, isn't it? Really
of course.
So it's about just gradually beginning to look at things that maybe you can do. Well, sometimes even thinking, what are the things that I used to like doing?
Exactly.
Maybe I could do.
And so, I know with pain it's really hard because we feel down, but to me with art gives this glimmer of joy. It can be through your favorite song, it can be through your favorite painting, it can be through trying to draw something, even if it's art is not meant to look good, it's just meant to mean something to you.
Yes. But then that's hard if you're a perfectionist and you need to get it right. And then it's about recognizing that that's holding you back, One of the things that I learned a while ago, and that I do sometimes, if I'm trying to work something out, maybe planning something, strategizing, I will get a big piece of paper and some coloring pens, and I will get out of my office and I'll go and lie on the floor in the living room, and kick my legs up, and just sort of do, just write things down, put lines and colors. That's not me at all. I'm more organized, but I do find that doing that does help, and just sort of let things go more. Just like if Zoe and I actually were working on something, we often, if we're wanting to come up with ideas and things, we don't do that in the office. In lockdown, on one occasion, we met in a park, and we just sat on the opposite end of a bench, and then we just brainstormed. But the main place we go to is this really big cafe, a coffee shop, or it's a garden centre with a coffee shop. And we go there, and it's got a beautiful, there's glass windows, the whole side looking over the valley. It's beautiful. And we'll just sit there, and we just find that we're out of the office, so we're not contained in that work box. And we have come up with so many ideas that we would probably struggle with somewhere else. So this is, although I'm talking about work, this is exactly the same for somebody who's in pain, to just look out of the box. You're in this box of pain. How could you maybe get out? Oh, that's a metaphor, isn't it?
I know, I love it.
So how could we then get out of that box, even just sort of reaching out every now and again, doing something, like you say, just sort of even just putting music on, or just doing something that is slightly different from what they have been doing.
Even looking up the sky, that. I remember when I had a really stressful job in an office, I would think, okay, I need to go out for my walk, and I was full of stress, and I thought, just look up, and just this movement, looking up, opening, looking at the trees, you see a bird. And sometimes I would even force myself to smile, even if I didn't feel like smiling. But then I think this, even if it's an inauthentic smile, it does something to the body. And
a study has shown that if you put a pencil in your mouth or a pen in your mouth, the muscles are in the position of smiling, so your brain thinks you're smiling. So it increases the endorphins. And I to be honest, I've been known to do that. I know I was going through a really challenging time a few years ago, and I remember going away and staying on at a friend's static caravan, and I would walk along the beach, and I was doing some, just taking time for me to work on me, to be able to build my resilience to deal with what was going on. And I would, the importance again of posture as well as smiling, of opening up, being like a Superman, Superwoman pose, shoulders, and that then if you hold that position for 2 minutes, then that can boost your endorphins. And so I would go out, and it was winter anyway, which was good because I didn't want to look too much of a fool, but I would pull my hood up over me, I would grin, and I would actually just walk with my arms behind my back and my head up, because I knew, and purposefully walking, because I'm becoming self-empowered and saying, I am okay, I can do this. And I used to do that when I would take walking breaks, and not working breaks, writing breaks. And I would start my day off by going for a walk and do some positive self-talk and smiling and shoulders back. So when I came back, I was in a better frame of mind to actually start being creative and writing.
Yes, so there's lots of little tricks. It's amazing. It's really the mind-body connection in working. It's great.
Absolutely. So when you talked to us, you were talking about some of the metaphors you use with pain as well. Do you want to talk about how you explained about that?
Do you mean the metaphor about the nervous system? Are you talking about this one? Or?
It's up to you. What do you think might be helpful for people?
Yes. So it's really useful to explain how the autonomic nervous system works by comparing it to alarm system in your house, because that's something that people know and experience. And it also helps, taking a step back and looking at what pain could be. So let's say, and it's something that I've heard on the Curable app. So the mind, but which podcast was it? Tell me about your pain. So I know that in the field it's used a lot, but I think it's a perfect metaphor. So
it is.
When you know that if you burn your toast, your smoke alarm or the smoke detector will not make the difference between real danger, like your house on fire, or just your breakfast being ruined. So it's still, and when the alarm goes off, it's horrible, and you want it to be switched off, and it's just chaos in the house because it's going on. But there's not this fear because the cause is just burnt toast. So if we compare it to pain, and pain being always an interpretation from the brain, for me, that's what's really changed the way I understand pain. So the smoke alarm, my smoke alarm, even when I lived in my old flat, when I was having a hot shower, so it was literally water. So the what do you call it? The smoke from the water.
Oh, right, the steam.
Steam
Steam
used to trigger my smoke alarm. Like, seriously, It's the opposite of fire. It's water, and it used to trigger it.
Wow.
So, so the interpretation of this smoke alarm was that anything that looks a bit blurry is smoke, therefore dangerous. But most of the time it's not. So it's always better, I guess, to have an oversensitive smoke alarm, so that you know that once you know that it's safe, you can calm down. But because if you don't have the smoke alarm, then if there's a real fire, you're in big trouble of life-threatening thing. So and pain, same thing. It's your brain triggering the smoke alarm through pain that is felt physically. And with this type of work, the TMS pain is harmless. It's horrible, but it's harmless.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like the smoke alarm, the neural pathways become sensitized, and they learn that, they're going to react to that. And then become overreactive. And also it's like the smoke alarm can sometimes go off and then it's not reset. And if it's not reset, then no wonder the pain just persists. So yes, I think that's a really good metaphor to explain it with. Yeah. So if anybody would like to ask any questions about any of this or anything else about their own experiences, then by all means post a question.
Don't be shy, bring on the questions.
Yes. Right. Normally we've got people popping in and saying hello, but for some reason we don't today. But we've got plenty to chat about, though. So what else in your work do you use on the creative side? What else do you use to help your clients that you're working with?
So I really follow the clients. So I've got a lot of different tools because everyone's different. And I love to work with movement as well, and even just moving in a different way. So let's say if a client is struggling with pain in the foot, I tell them try to safely, if you feel safe when you do your exercise, or if you feel safe to do your exercise and walking, try to walk backwards just to get this with mindfulness, just to get this, create those new neural pathways, because when we move in a different way, we create new neural pathways.
Absolutely.
And the priority for me is that the client feels safe at all times. So I've started yoga even for myself, because that's really moving the body slowly in a very different way. And the first session I was exhausted, and then my body learns, and then my body knew what to do. So even this exercise with the cup, it's in the SIRPA training, and there's this thing with the cup song, and you learn the yes, and that's a great way to experience building a new neural pathway through repetition.
Yes, true.
And I always encourage clients
to begin with.
Yes, it's hard, and then you know it by heart. Same thing when you play an instrument, or if I'm learning a new song on the guitar, if I'm learning a new chord, I'm thinking I'm building a new neural pathway, and it can be done through dance as well. At first, you don't know where to move, or it is the hand which way. And then the body learns it and you don't have to think about it.
Yeah. And I remember when I had met my husband, and I used to ski, he'd never skied. And we went to, in those days, a dry ski slope in Gloucester. And you know what? I learned to keep away from him when he was learning something.
Yes.
He was getting so cross that he couldn't get it right. And he kept repeating it. And he just was really struggling to get it right. And it took a lot of practice for him to do it. But then, you know, he's better than I am, certainly faster than I am. Maybe I'm a bit tidier, but he's definitely faster than I am. And he'll attempt all sorts now. Not that we've been for a while now, but it was really interesting that, you know, he really had to focus 100% on what he was trying to do. Therefore, he couldn't actually talk to me or anything else because he was 100% focused on trying to learn. But then, of course, then as time goes by, you're learning it, those neural pathways develop, and he didn't even need to think about it. So, yeah, very right. Just movement or something, repetition. I like the backward bike video as well. You know,
yes,
the guy
that's what. Yes,
the bike. I often share that video to explain to people about the need for repetition and how it's building new neural pathways. You know, and for people who've not seen it, it's a guy who's taught himself to ride a bike where when he turned left, he went right. When you turn right, you went left. And he used to demonstrate. It took him months to learn, didn't it? And when he would demonstrate this on stage with people, always people have said, "Oh, that's easy. I can do that." And nobody was able to do it. And yet then he showed his son learned, I think it was about in as many weeks as it took him months, because kids are growing their neuroplasticity, you know, much more easy to develop things because they're growing and learning. And then I love the fact that I use a picture of a cornfield, a man walking through a cornfield, and there's a path there, and you can really see the path and this high corn. And I use that as an example of being at the edge of that. So you've got at the beginning of that pathway. And that when you're triggered, when something happens, you just automatically, it's so easy to go down that pathway because there's no corn there or whatever it is. I don't know what the cereal is, but it's just a flat path. So it's so easy to go that way rather than trying to wade your way through the, you know, hip high corn, let's say, in the field. And it's just a lovely way to do that. And so this guy riding, it took him ages. He would get on the bike and try to go down that normal riding the bike path. But he was taking ages, like my husband was skiing, to actually learn to develop this new neural pathway. And just as in a path, as you start going down that path and walking over it and over it and over it, then it begins to just flatten down, and then the corn won't grow there. And the other path will start to grow over, won't it? So it'll grow over, but there'll still be flat, probably a bit more solid ground underneath it. And that I always think is like the dormant neural pathway that's dormant, but it's there, just like a memory in the past. If I said to you, can you remember, you know, I don't know, your first day of school or something that I wouldn't remember that actually, I have to say, but something specific that you would remember, you would recall it. But it's not there all the time. It's just dormant, but you can recall it, especially things with more emotion, because when there's more emotion, you're more likely to, it's a more ingrained neural pathway. So this guy who then manages this new neural pathway is riding this new odd bike that goes the wrong way, but he's learned that. This one's dormant and he's learned to. And then you see him in the video starting to ride a normal bike again, and he just can't do it, can he? And he feels
He was hilarious. He was in Amsterdam, falling over. Everyone was laughing.
Yes, wondering why this grown man couldn't ride a bike. Yeah, but it only took him about 20 minutes, didn't it? And then that neural pathway was, he was able to then ride his bike. And I think that's important as well, because, you know, if people, even when people have recovered, if they then don't see this as this personal development journey, and actually recognize that this is about looking after ourselves and dealing with stress and etc. And then that neural pathway is there. And if we continue to just repress and avoid emotions and we just keep busy, etc., then there's still that chance of that neural pathway being triggered. But then once we recognize that and we do something about it, then it doesn't need to persist.
And thinking about those building neural pathways, it gives so much hope. And we know it's not easy to learn how to ride a bike that goes the other way around.
Yes.
But we can.
Yes.
And every time a client feels stuck and they go, oh, I feel like I'm always stuck, it doesn't change. I said, don't forget your brain is neuroplastic, and it's absolutely possible. It's not an easy ride,
Yeah.
but it's absolutely
your brain
possible.
wants to do the easy thing, doesn't it?
Yes, of course.
The easy thing's what you've always done, that habit from the past. How easy is that to do that? And in fact, there's one way to deal with habits that I read about in a book a while ago. Is actually, if your habit is to do something I can't think at the moment. Well, it might be like every time you have a cup of coffee, you want to have a cigarette. Something like that, I would always say, if you're going to work on a habit, to replace it with something rather than just stop it, because otherwise that's hard, isn't it, to just stop something. So if somebody's giving up smoking, for example, and they normally would have a cup of coffee at 11 o'clock and have a fag, I would say, well, don't stop at 11 o'clock to have a coffee. Go out for a walk, maybe, or change the timing or whatever, but do something different.
Yeah. So that it's still connected. So the path through the corn is still connected to the highway, but it's not the highway.
Yeah. So talk about the highways. Go on. Explain the highways to people.
The highways, that's for me, that's just you mean the ones about the
metaphors that you
the
were
metaphors,
using,
yes,
and side roads.
Yeah.
And
so
then
roads are.
We've got a question from Rosie, so we'll answer this in a little while after Edith's talked about that.
Yes. So when I was preparing my webinar for Monday, I was trying to think, how can I explain what a metaphor is? And the road, I love roads, and I love, Georgie, your metaphor about neural pathways, because that's something I use as well I use the metaphor of going on a hike and, going out of not on the off beaten tracks. Yeah, off the beaten track. Yes, my words got jumbled. So yeah, I love roads and path. Of course, it's very meaningful on the journey of being a human, I guess. So to explain the metaphor, I use the metaphor of, because I wanted to explain the metaphor with the metaphor. So we have a big highway, which is a direct road towards meaning. Such as a description, using descriptive words. And when we use a metaphor, we go to the same meaning, but we take a side road, which can be a new neural pathway as well if you want to train your brain to be more imaginative. So you go on the side road, and the experience on the side road is very different, and it's more rich, and you experience more things, but it goes to the same meaning as the highway. So such as, to go back to my first example, when the way I was feeling out of lockdown, I was trapped, but even though I was free, but trapped at the same time. So that's the highway, the description, trapped, but free at the same time. And my metaphor was, I feel like a lion in the cage, even though the cage is open, the lion doesn't want to come out. So you see the side road takes a bit longer. It uses images. It uses a different way to tell a story, but the meaning at the end is the same.
Lovely. Yeah, no, I really like that. And the other thing, just going back to when we talk about habits, I was saying I'd read something and then I got sidetracked by talking about the other bit about habits. But often when we are triggered and we would go into a habitual pattern, whether that's feeling emotional and going for that cake or the cigarette, or maybe we're at that point on that cornfield and we've been triggered. And even if we go down that pain or into that symptom, it's pausing for 10 seconds.
Absolutely.
Even if you just pause for 10 seconds and do something different, and if you manage it for 10 seconds, then another 10, in a way, when you're talking about pain, because then that impulse could then have just passed by. Obviously doing some emotional awareness work and acknowledging that emotion is beneficial as well. But this is just talking generally about habits, that if we can not do that automatic behavior, like we get pain and then we hold on to that. We get pain and then we grab our shoulder, let's say, and we're stroking our shoulder. Even if we start doing that, that we can at that point just calm our breathing down and self-soothe and reassure ourselves and focus on doing something else, then that can be helpful. And I know you use something about movements, don't you? If you see somebody doing a movement.
Yes, so depending on clients, I pay attention when the client describes their pain. It's always meaningful. So some clients will go straight into imagery and metaphors, and some clients will mime the pain or the sensation. And so it's somatic work. And for me, all this movement is a metaphor as well, because you want to mean something, but you don't use the highway of the descriptive words. You're showing your experience in a different way. So if the client is willing, and if they like to, if it's natural for them to use body language, also body language comes from the subconscious. So that's really, to me, it's gold. It's a direct channel towards the subconscious. I work with the movement. So there's different methods. I like to ask the client to amplify and see what is happening in their body. Is it the same? Is it the sensation the same? Is it different? Does it move? Does it stay there? Does an image come up? And this movement, so if I took the example last time of something itchy, if you amplify the movement, what are you doing? You're tearing off your clothes, or maybe you don't want to be in your skin anymore. So there's also meaning in movements. And clients who feel comfortable, I will ask them, so what are you doing with your gesture right now? What are you miming? And then they may compare it to something totally different, and they may say, oh, I'm getting rid of my uniform. I hate my job. I don't want that uniform. Or I want to show my authenticity. So there's through movement, you can access deep, deep meaning for the client that the client is not aware of, because they've always been just, of course, focusing on the sensation rather than exploring the sensations in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you, we talked about movement, like sort of unconscious movements being often unconscious. And I've seen this so much where people don't realize they're doing it, but they've got a painful shoulder, but they're often doing that. And by doing that, they're reinforcing that there's something wrong. Okay, I'm reinforcing this neural pathway. And that could, once they are aware of that, even if somebody else points it out to them, that could be an opportunity to sort of then, maybe go like that, or bring their arm down and just slow the breathing and just really notice that as a trigger and go, okay, self-soothe, calm your breathing, because then you're reassuring your primal brain, it's okay, I'm safe.
Or give yourself a hug. Touch is so important. Yeah.
Stroking your arms. Absolutely. Okay, so Rosie, let's look at your question now. So Rosie says she's had CFS for many years, but knows now that it's TMS. I've been reading and listening and learning about the mind body for 18 months. The pain fatigue has lowered, but I still have constant tingling in my legs, which is a constant reminder of the pain which walking and standing triggered. Can you give any advice to stop my brain being aware of it? Is it just continuing to keep calming myself? First of all, I'd say, Rosie, well done. That's fantastic. To be able to have eased that pain and the fatigue is a real good start. And I always encourage people to put things on an evidence sheet so they can notice the improvements and what's happening.
That's a great tool, the evidence sheet.
Yeah, having an evidence sheet so that if they're low or they have a bad day for whatever reason, they can get this out. And the evidence sheet can be things that maybe times when they had pain that there was nothing they were doing, they just had a thought, or times that they didn't have pain and they would have expected to have it, as well as some of the evidence that they're reading, any of the actual scientific evidence or what any of the specialists have said, anything like that is evidence that this is a mind-body condition rather than a physical problem could be really helpful. And also to notice how far you've come, rather than that you're still not there yet. Because if you're always thinking, still not there yet, and I really want to be better by such and such a time, it creates a lot of stress. So Edith, how would you consider helping her with that? Any advice to stop her brain being aware of this constant tingling, which is constant reminder of the pain which walking and standing triggered. So I presume, is it worse still with walking and standing then, Rosie, or is it just constant there all the time? So yes, it is about self-soothing, calming yourself, slow breathing, reassurance. It can be the stroking, emotional awareness. But Edith, what would you suggest?
Yes, so I don't think we can stop the brain from noticing. Unfortunately, we can't really control what our brain is doing. That's the hard part of the job. I don't know if you meditate, Rosie, but I would meditate, I would journal, and I would connect with emotions. So underneath your pain, so for me, the pain, it's like an iceberg. So all your symptoms are top of the iceberg, and underneath there's this big chunk of unknown. Yeah. And when you feel comfortable, if you feel safe, it's to take that deep dive and connect with the emotions around what's happening in your life at the moment, what was happening when your pain started, and explore that with a therapist if you prefer, whatever makes you feel safe. For me, it's all about digging those emotions and those difficult truths, definitely.
And it's interesting, I just noticed you say the word digging, but actually your work isn't about digging, and generally it's not, because it's about allowing, isn't it? It's about just allowing that to happen. And I think sometimes, I'm only picking you up, Edith, just because that is a word people tend to use, and that shows me that they're actively trying to find something, and that's often less helpful. And I know through all that you've talked about anyway this morning, that you're really good at allowing yourself to, and encouraging patients to surrender, let go.
It's sending the message to your brain that you're ready to know, I'm safe, I can know, you can tell me what's going on now. This state of surrendering. And creativity is good for that, because with creativity, when you're try to write a poem and you find different rhymes or you try to create a story about what is happening in your life in a sort of a fun way, it's not effort, but whatever comes out through creativity, whether it's a bad drawing that you've made, whether it's a dream you had, it's the subconscious emerging and not you digging for it. So dreams as well, Rosie, dreams are great.
Yes, and out of interest, Rosie, are you generally creative, or would you consider yourself to be creative or not? And it's funny that word creative. And I was talking about this with Kay Bradley Higgins, who's one of our colleagues. She's local to me, and we went on a course. Hello, Ariel. We went on I don't even know what it was called, a glass course on Sunday afternoon this weekend. So it was a creative, artistic thing where we were given tiles, so making glass tiles. So we had bits of glass and we were designing a tile, and then it's put in the kiln and then heated up, and then it melts together. Now, I used to say that I'm not creative. I can't do creative. Great. Yeah, I'll come back to that, Rosie. I used to say I'm not creative because I'm not artistic. I can't, and I only passed one art exam in my life, and that's because they lowered the pass rate. Okay. So I can't draw, paint for toffee. Okay. But then when you think of creativity, it's not all about painting, drawing. It's, writing a book, is creative. Writing a course. There are lots of different things that we can call creative as well. But it was interesting when I sat down at the table and had all this tile and all these different coloured glass bits. And even though she was saying you do flowers and you can do bees, and my brain went blank, because I'm thinking I'm having to start from an empty canvas here, and I'm knew I wasn't good at that. So in the end, we looked on Pinterest. Kay had that on her phone, so we looked at various pictures, and that's all I needed to then be able to trigger myself to be able to do that. So out of interest, though, Rosie says, yes, I paint with watercolors. So there we are. So we've got a creative person. So what would you suggest that she does?
So I would suggest, it's a bit hard just like this, I would suggest use that beautiful skill. I don't know if you can get in the zone. When I draw, nothing else matters. I don't know if that's a state that you can reach, but even you can try to paint your pain. You can try to paint your pain every day as it changes. You can try to paint your childhood. You can try to paint your ideal life. You can try to paint where you're at now, where you want to be. So there's infinite options. But even just starting with the white canvas, I love that. To me, that's so exciting. A white canvas, everything is possible. So you can decide today, I'm going to be, I want to draw who I want to be. And tomorrow I feel awful. I'm going to draw how bad I feel. And you see, see how you, when you are in the zone, how maybe that's when your brain will focus on the drawing and not on your legs. That's interesting to pay attention to your symptoms.
Absolutely. And don't forget, Rosie, the power of visualization or imagery with changing our neural pathways. Because, your brain doesn't know if it's happening now or whether it's something that happened in the past or the future. And also if you have emotion linked to it and really feel this wonderful emotion while you're imagining something, that strengthens those neural pathways as well. So that can help you. So if you, for example, if you imagine yourself standing around and chatting to friends in a park and watching what's going on around you, and you're feeling wonderful, and maybe a dog comes up, and if you like dogs, you'd stroke it. If not, let's not have a dog in that imagery. And it might be somebody throws a ball towards you, you sort of bend over, pick it up, chuck it back. You're not even focusing on what's going on in your body at all with your legs. You just know that you're happy, you're having a fun time. You could imagine yourself walking around the park with somebody, and again, you're in your body, imagining you're chatting to somebody and seeing what's happening around you, and you're feeling great. And that is reinforcing to your brain that this is safe, this is okay, you can do it. And just doing that as a form of meditation, just quietly going into just being really quiet and then being able to imagine that can be really empowering. So that could be a way forward. Okay, let's move on then. So Louise, good morning. So do you have any advice for those struggling with doubt that it's TMS and not structural physical? I can trace the beginnings of each symptom back to times of high stress and doctors diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which is synonymous with TMS, yes, but I just get doubt nagging at me all the time about my increasing knee pain and lower back pain every time I try to do housework, bending or carrying heavy things, etc. It seems like a muscle weakness, but I was never immobile, so I can't read anymore for some reason. That often happens where it stops and we can't read the rest. Okay, so doubts definitely hold people back. The only problem is if you have a very hypervigilant state, if that's, one of your protector parts is actually protecting you by hypervigilant and being very careful, then that can cause you to continue to question. And this is about being in the body. So if you are able to rationalize, one of the things is, first of all, if you've read the studies about fibromyalgia, the links with past trauma, for example, and you've read all the books and you really do consciously get that it is TMS, but it's moments when you're feeling doubts, then that's the time I would suggest is that you write your doubts down and actually get them clearly out on paper, put those doubts down, and then rationalize them, so that you, rather than then focusing all the time on what's wrong on your fears, you are rationalizing it and you're learning to retrain your brain from going down that rabbit hole of fear. And if you're very hypervigilant, you'll never get to the bottom of it. There'll be another query coming up. Then by rationalizing it, then that can be really helpful. There's various other things, but Edith, is anything you would suggest?
I always go back to the smoke alarm. So when there's pain, sometimes the smoke alarm goes off very often it's when the toast is burning. So it's not because there's pain that there's a structural problem. It's an interpretation of the brain. So for me, the knowledge that the pain is interpreted and created by the brain, and it's sometimes, yes, there's a structural issue, sometimes not. But just pain on its own doesn't mean a structural problem. So I always take a step back. I'm thinking, okay, the alarm is off. And I always open up the possibilities to emotional stress, doing the housework. I mean,
do you really? What I
who
was
loves
thinking was,
the housework?
do you want to do them? Yeah.
Always keep I'm standing at the crossroad between the highway of structural pain and the neural pathway of maybe it's emotional, maybe I'm stressed. And just opening your mind to other possibilities, for me, is a good first step.
Yeah. And recognizes that this is conditioning, Louise, in that, you know, once your brain learns, like a smoke alarm does, that, or anything that's going to be a bit like fire, it's going to trigger, your brain will recognize that. So you go into a particular movement that you've learned is dangerous, then your primal brain's learned to be dangerous, then that will easily trigger symptoms. Having a thought, if you're highly sensitized, just having a thought about, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that, that can cause pain. So it's absolutely recognizing that pain is always what's going on in the brain. How is the brain interpreting what's happening? So if you took your head off, you wouldn't have any pain. Okay, you know, your brain is involved in all of this, and it's about you reassuring yourself you feel safe. And if you're struggling, then there are always people that can help as well. Okay, so we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm just going to briefly, we're not going to get through all of these, I'm afraid. Luckily, it's mainly Guy. So, okay, Guy, I wonder if you had any experience of working with people living with chronic migraines. Yes, there's a lot of people out there who've been suffering from chronic migraines. Have you any specific tips from a TMS? I love that, tips from a TMS perspective. I've been living with almost daily migraine sensations and waves for 3 years. I've benefited from TMS techniques generally, journaling, breathing exercises, Pilates. Interesting, Pilates. I wouldn't suggest that's a particular TMS technique, but I wanted to know if your clients with migraines have had success with particular techniques. Thank you, and thank you about the interview, Guy. First of all, I would say, if you are looking at this process, this approach, as using techniques, as finding a technique to help. Yes, we've talked about a few strategies that can help, but to be able to really take this on board, it's about really recognizing that this is a personal development program. Okay. And I worked with somebody many years ago who we had an assessment, and this is very common of people who read a book, recover like that, and down the line, well, they haven't learned anything, have they? Down the line, they have more stress. They maybe get that pain back again, or another one. And then they start going into fear. Maybe think, right, well, let's read the book. I'll get better if I read the book. Okay. So they read the book they read before, or maybe they do a bit of journaling. But unless they're learning how this is about us and how we deal with stress, learning to deal better with stress, learning to detect the triggers. What do we do about the triggers? So just as an overall answer, Guy, there isn't a particular technique to help with migraines, as in any other symptom, because migraines is just one of the numerous symptoms, and it's less about the symptom and more about the approach. But what I would say is that for all of them, slow belly breathing, and I keep saying I'm going to be doing a video about this soon, and I will at some point, slow belly breathing to self-soothe, and emotional awareness, somatic tracking can be helpful. If you look on the SIRPA website, and I'll put a link in here later, I wrote a blog about chronic pain and alexithymia, which is not being able to feel and understand emotions very well, and emotions. So basically chronic pain and emotions. And there's at the bottom of that, there is a strategy that I talk people through that you can actually, that is like a form of meditation. The more you are able to understand, notice your triggers, Guy, the better, and then work with the emotional side of things. So just to finish off, Edith, is there anything quick you'd like to say about that as well?
Yes, I was about to say triggers. Identifying the triggers. One of my latest clients had issues with migraines, and she noticed the pattern. So she would take a notepad and write down what's going on, how am I feeling every time she had a migraine, and she could identify some triggers, including one where she's rushed. And for a nervous system, rushing was not safe. So she started to slow down, and the migraines decreased dramatically. So triggers are important. Before we go, I really want to recommend this app for meditation.
Yes, do.
I am addicted, Georgie. I've been meditating every day for 2 weeks nonstop. It's called Sync Tuition.
It's called what?
Sync Tuition.
Oh.
And there's a free version, of course. I'm paying for it now because I just love it so much. And it's using stereo sounds. So it's called binaural sounds. I don't know. It creates a soundscape. So I've always struggled with just the body scanning. I find it a bit boring. I should not say that, but yeah. So it creates a landscape of sounds based on nature. And because it's stereo, you can feel your brain going different directions. And it's just great. And I'm loving every day. Half an hour. I've been meditating half an hour every day for the past 2 weeks, and I love it.
So in that case, Edith, in case anybody's interested, could you put the link to it in the chat box later on when we finished?
Yes, of course I will. No worries. Yeah.
Okay, well, we are going to have to go now. Thank you for your kind words, Louise. And Rosie, Louise, thank you. And Guy, that I've got a suggestion that might be helpful as well, and I'll try and remember to contact you about that. Okay, so I think we better call it a day now, but thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Georgie.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.